This is Making the Case. I'm Yodit Tewolde. Just before the Thanksgiving holiday, the whole country watched as 3 white men were convicted for the murder of Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia. Travis McMichael, his father, Gregory McMichael, and William Bryan are now awaiting sentencing. All 3 could spend the rest of their lives in prison. The trial had the nation's attention for weeks. Here on Making the Case, we watched a team of prosecutors meticulously present the facts and evidence and ultimately convincing an almost all-white jury in the Deep South that the defendants were guilty. Tonight, that team is here. Cobb County District Attorney Flynn Broady, Senior Assistant District Attorney and Lead Prosecutor Linda Dunikoski, Senior Assistant District Attorney Paul Camarillo, and Assistant District Attorney Larissa Ollivierre. It's a pleasure having the whole team here tonight. Welcome.
Thank you.
So we covered this trial every night with panels of legal experts. I got their reactions to the jury's verdicts, and now I want yours, starting with you, Linda. You were lead prosecutor on the case and the last to address the jury. What was your first thought when you heard the judge read that first set of guilty verdicts for Travis McMichael?
Thought that the jury really understood the case. My first reaction was, they understood it, they understood the facts, they understood the evidence, they understood what we had presented as our case, and they were a really smart jury. They were paying attention, they took a lot of notes, they really were tuned in to the evidence and to everything everyone was saying. And I think they did exactly what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to apply the law that the judge gave them to the facts of the case, and they came back with the right verdict, in our opinion.
Now, Flynn, this was a case your office inherited after 2 local prosecutors with conflicts of interest recused themselves. What kind of pressure were you and the office under taking over such a high-profile case?
I think the biggest thing is having an African-American as the district attorney really put a lot of pressure on us from the African-American community that these men be brought to justice. And that's where the pressure stemmed from, just knowing that not only this community, but this state and this nation was looking for us to bring justice for this young man.
Larissa, to you. So not only was there pressure on the black DA, but there's pressure on a jury to get it right, but also on the prosecution as a whole. Here you have an almost all-white jury deciding the fate of 3 white men accused of killing a black man, and in Georgia. So as the only African-American on the team in court every day, did you feel even more pressure to deliver?
Parents for Wanda and Marcus Sr. I knew we had the law on our side, and I knew we had the evidence on our side. And we all felt really good about our jury. They were smart. We got a chance to talk to them at length. And we felt comfortable that we would get a guilty verdict because the law and the evidence, it was just on our side in the case.
Ooh, so getting to speak to the jury afterwards is so hard to do as a trial attorney. They're always ready to just leave as soon as possible. How many of the jurors actually stuck around for you all to speak to? Paul.
Well, I think what Larissa was referring to is our voir dire weeks that we were with them. Actually really talking to them at length. And the judge gave us a lot of time to go ahead and get to know them pretty well. So in that regard, the judge did give us a good opportunity to get to know them well enough to be able to pick a jury that we felt comfortable with, no matter what their race was. And going into that, we just knew that we had the jury that was going to deliver for us.
So you all didn't get a chance to actually speak to the jurors after the trial wrapped?
No, not at all. Unfortunately, or fortunately, the Glenn County Sheriff's Department was excellent. They really had security down tight. And I think one of the things that happened immediately after the verdict was to go ahead and move the jury out, move the judge out, move everybody to their appropriate locations so that everyone could respond appropriately to the verdict. And the Sheriff's Department did an excellent job of doing that. So we did not get the opportunity to speak with any of the jurors after the verdict.
Larissa, to you. This was a highly charged trial, super emotional. What was one of the biggest strategic challenges that you and the team faced in preparing for trial?
I think just, we knew that if we prepared the case, which we spent countless hours preparing the case, that we would get the right result. And the biggest thing for us was to focus on our facts and the law and not worry so much about the publicity. The publicity was there and it was going to be there. But for us, I think we just tried to treat it as another case and approach it in that way. But it was different, obviously, because of the media attention associated with it.
Linda, back to you. Let's talk about how you presented the case. For most, this was about race, but we heard very little about that during the state's case in chief. I understand the approach, but was that always the plan, or did you decide on that approach after a nearly all-white jury was impaneled?
No, as a team, we had discussed this approach back in 2020. When we had first gotten the case and we first got together, we looked at the facts of the case. We knew we had the video, we knew we had the defendant's statements, we put all of our evidence together, and we began to look at this because in the state of Georgia, the state is not required to prove premeditation and the state's not required to prove motive. And because any motive such as racial animus or anything is not required to be proven by the state, we started early on going strategically, how do we approach whatever jury we get? How do we approach the jurors of Glenn County appropriately to put our case forward in the best possible light, since the facts were on our side and the law was on our side, to make sure that they understood that this was a homicide, this was a murder, and that's what we set out to prove.
All right, I've got more with Cobb County DA's finest when we come back after this short break, so stay tuned for more Making the Case. I'm back with the prosecution team who secured guilty verdicts for the 3 men who murdered Ahmaud Arbery. I've got Flynn Broady, Cobb County's district attorney, joined by Linda Dunikoski, Paul Camarillo, and Larissa Ollivierre. All right, guys, again, this was an emotionally charged case on just the facts alone. But the actions and the words by the defense only heighten those emotions. As attorneys, you understand that some of that could just be, par for the course, that everyone has a job to do and you can't take any of that stuff personally. So some would argue that they crossed a couple of lines. I'd like to get your take, all of you, starting with you, Linda. Was there ever a time where you were just taken by surprise by the way the defense presented themselves or this case?
I wasn't necessarily taken by surprise. The way they presented the case was standard criminal defense 101. And the first thing you always do is claim that there was no crime. And the next thing you claim is my person didn't do it. And they couldn't do either of those in this case because it was, of course, on video. So the next thing that you have to do as a criminal defense attorney is you blame the victim. And that was the strategy that they went for and they clung to. They wanted to attack Ahmaud. They wanted to paint a portrait of him based on some of his prior interactions with law enforcement, some of the worst days of his life, not every day of his life. And they wanted to go into things that the defendants knew absolutely nothing about. So one of the things when you want to claim self-defense is that evidence of a prior relationship, sometimes something you might know about the victim and something that you may have had prior interactions with the victim, that would go into your thinking behind why you felt it was necessary to defend yourself in the situation. And in this case, none of the defendants knew Mr. Arbery at all, knew nothing about him. Everyone was a complete stranger. So we fought very, very hard to keep the defense from maligning Ahmaud Arbery because they didn't know anything about him and it wasn't legally relevant. And we felt very, very good because we went in and we fought those motions where they were motioning to get that evidence in, and we were able to go ahead and keep it out because in the state of Georgia, it isn't really relevant, the character of the victim. And so the judge saw it our way, which he should have, and he kept that evidence out, which was really important. But that was their main line of defense, was to go ahead and paint Ahmaud in a certain light And I wasn't surprised when they tried to continue doing it throughout trial. It was just our job to put those obstacles in their way and make sure that they followed the court's rulings.
Well, you know, some of the actions taken on by some of the defense attorneys, Kevin Goff, for example, raising, you know, the issue of a mistrial, requesting one due to who was sitting in the courtroom. Those kind of things I understood to some degree. What I didn't understand, Paul, and maybe you could help me out here and give me some of your thoughts, was how one particular defense attorney, the attorney for Gregory McMichael, in her closing, made disparaging remarks about Ahmaud that honestly didn't make her argument that much stronger. There was just no point in maligning him in that way. And to me, I thought that was a line that was crossed. She didn't do anything, you know, she did a disservice to her client, basically. And I don't think it really went over well with the jurors. What was your thought when you heard her make such just disrespectful comments about someone who's deceased?
Yeah, I was shocked, I think, like everybody else in the world when we heard that. You know, Laura's a brilliant lawyer. She is a very, very smart lawyer. I think that she was probably trying to get backdoor some theories and thoughts into the jurors' minds by saying things like that, like maybe he wasn't a runner, or maybe he had some issues that they really couldn't get into, but maybe talking about his toenails might have brought that to their light, to their attention in some way, without actually saying those things. I don't think it went over well. Obviously, nobody really did. But sometimes when you don't have the facts along the side, you just try to confuse and grasp at straws. And I think that maybe that's what ended up happening. Maybe it was a last-ditch effort. I'm not sure, but I was just as shocked as everybody else.
Flynn, Kevin Goff did an interview after the verdict and talked about filing a motion for a new trial. He didn't give specific grounds for the request, but did mention that the environment surrounding the trial made it difficult for his client to receive a fair trial. What is your response to that?
I think it was a bunch of garbage more than anything. He really wanted to promote the idea that it was a us against them, a black against white thing. And in doing so, he was trying to use the fact that those protests were intimidating to the jurors, were in an attempt to sway the jurors in a direction that they would not normally go because they were afraid of what might happen outside the courtroom. And I applaud Judge Walmsley for his performance during the trial and basically pushing down everything that Mr. Goff was trying to do to make sure that this trial went on and went forward. And we did a lot of painstaking work to make sure that these defendants got a fair trial. One of the things people didn't realize in voir dire was probably 90% of the people had negative feelings about the McMichaels. And we made sure those people did not get on the jury so we could make sure that these defendants got a fair trial. And in the work of Goff, more than anything, it hurt his client because it showed that his focus was that this was a black against white thing, and because I've got a white jury, maybe I can sway them by bringing them onto my side because I'm also white. And I think with that direction, they did the wrong thing. And like Linda said earlier, we wanted to make this about the facts, about the law. And that's why we prevailed in this case.
Well, we all watched that moment outside the courthouse when the Arbery family walked out to a cheerful crowd of supporters. Linda, how much did the family's strength and faith leading up to and throughout this trial keep you and the team going in your pursuit of accountability?
Every single one of us on this team, all we do is what we do for the victims of these kinds of crimes and for their family members. And Mr. Arbery's strength and Wanda Cooper Jones's strength, it was amazing to us. They were there every single day. They talked to us every single day. We checked in with them. Oftentimes family members see things we can't see, and we go to them for their interpretation and their insight. And they were truly an inspiration to us, because when we do this, we are their voices. And that's what's so important to us as prosecutors, to be the voice for the victims.
So I've got one last question, since we all have the benefit of hindsight. Is there anything that you all would have changed about the way you prosecuted this case? I know that you all secured convictions for all three defendants, but there's always something after reflecting that you wish you might have done differently. Is there that one thing, or maybe several things? I don't know, to any one of you all.
There's always 100 things. I'm my own worst critic. I always go back and think, I wish I would have done this different. I didn't ask Travis McMichael enough questions on cross-examination. I wish I'd said 5 more points during my closing argument. I think that we always all look back on ourselves, and we aspire to perfection, but we very rarely make it.
One thing I'll say is the trial strategy that we started with, focusing on making this a right or wrong thing and following the law and the facts, was the most effective thing. This team here did so much work in preparing for this case. I applaud them in their dedication, what they did, the sacrifices that they made. I know Paul missed his daughter's birthday. Ollivierre missed the death of a family member. So there were so many things that went on that could have taken their attention away, but they maintained their focus and did the job that they were asked to do. And I believe that's why they were so successful in what they did.
Well, you guys definitely set an example for not only attorneys, but just sent a very loud message to this country. And hopefully we're more united than divided at this point. Linda Dunikoski, Paul Camarillo, Larissa Ollivierre, and Cobb County District Attorney Flynn Broady. It was a pleasure having all of you on tonight. Thank you so much.